Thanks for staying, everyone. I came across it when Dee Dee and Jeremy rang up Jocelyn to chat about something. We didn't even know what it was about. We went and met them, and
She said Dee Dee Gardner and Jeremy Kleiner from Plan B.
Plan B, sorry.
And Jocelyn Barnes, your co-writer.
I'm so used to the shorthand of like
just
talking to
making
all
sure
familiar faces. Yeah. I will say everyone's full name from now on, and also all other info I know about them, just to make sure that that information is accurate. So so met with Jeremy Kleiner and Dee Dee Gardner from Plan B Entertainment, which is co-owned with Brad Pitt. Just kidding. I mean, it's true, but and they, we just chatted for 2 hours, and then they said, hey, we have this book, Nickel Boys, that we think you might be interested in. Would you like to read it? And I read it, and it was phenomenal, as expected. It's a Colson Whitehead book. And
the book was already out, or
no, we had like a PDF. I printed out like our kind of confidential manuscript. Kind of, went from there with Jocelyn, obviously Jocelyn Barnes, co-writer.
At what point in the process of reading the book did you figure out how you wanted to adapt it? Did you know right away as you were reading, or did you have to sit with it for a bit?
Yeah, it's I love the question because it forces me to find the point which was not really in language, because you're reading it and you're kind of building your own universe. I think the first question that spurred, I think I can adapt it to the things that I'm interested in visually, was thinking about when Elwood realized that he was raced, like when he realized he was a black person. And that process to me, being a person that has come into the world as many other people on this stage and then had to be confronted with what the world says that you are, a black person, and obviously we are in varied degrees, was like a thing that I'm like, oh, that's quite poetic, and that's something that's cumulative, and that's something that's, looking glass kind of theory. So, yeah, but POV was the first thing I thought of, honestly. My work, Dennis. I have this image called I Home, and it's my hand holding, in a 4x5 image, holding a phone, and there's an antebellum home in the background. And to me, that was like an intervention in Southern photography that claimed authorship. And I went to that image immediately because that forces a person to understand who's looking.
I'm curious about the decision to do POV, not just to do POV, but to do POV in a sustained way. I'm wondering if you thought about, other films that have attempted this or not, or maybe photography was, was your reference point instead. But it's something that happens in films, but rarely happens for the duration of a film.
Yeah, I must say, Dennis, separately, I really wish I could look at all my friends here while I was talking. So maybe next time I'll be on the other end so I can look across their faces. Because I feel like I'm ignoring them. Sorry guys.
You can look there.
Okay. So I think Lady in the Lake was the first official film to attempt it, or do it, and honestly, from Enter the Void to there's a Catherine Bigelow film that does it, I think, quite well.
Strange Days.
Yeah, for a little bit. And Hardcore Henry, of course, was the one where it's like, oh, this is what we don't want it to be. Though the film's not the worst. I mean, the film is good, sorry. You guys know what I'm saying. It's a good film, but it's an action cam film. And to me, that's not POV. To me, that's having a camera in a wide frame close to someone's body, which is just giving you the sense of the sort of chaos of being the central point, central locus in time and movement. That's POV to me. That the test for POV, the proof of concept, which Jocelyn and I used to sort of to show and make the treatment and stuff, was images or scenes from Hell County, because the way in which the camera is used there, it's long lens and it's shallow focus, and you can control someone's attention, which is to me closer to POV than having a wide frame and being able to see the same field of view. Right. And so that's kind of how went back to Hell County for it.
Right. I wanted to bring the actors into this actually, and maybe hear from all of them about just what it was like to work with this very specific way of making a film. Actually, maybe we can start with Ethan and Brandon. And before, Ramel, can you talk about casting the two of them?
Thank the Lord we got him. I mean, honestly, thank the Lord we got every person on this stage. I think all films are, contingent on its parts, but I feel like if without each of these pieces, like it kind of collapses in a way. But I think that's what happens when it's done and there's like some sort of like magical touch that is ineffable, that unites everything. These two were the standouts by far from the casting tapes that we got. I found that, we found that because it was a huge collective process of choosing. Brandon was the first one we saw. He just was Turner. And he was also other characters you wanted him to be, which was why he was so good. Like, he didn't read like a historical young man. He read like someone who was, bringing his personal life into the character. And then Ethan here was the latest find and the most scariest, because we, were weeks away from shooting and we had to find who we thought was the right guy. And then we saw his face and his eyes and his optimism that just kind of exists even in conversation. And we were sold. And then when they did a chemistry read, everyone, big sigh of relief.
Ethan, Brandon, I was curious to hear you talk about just, this particular way of shooting the film. Did you find it like an interesting or useful restraint? Was it confining as an actor to have to work this way?
Yeah, it's completely nothing like I think anyone on the stage has ever experienced before. And honestly, I didn't pay attention to the fact that that's how we were going to be doing it during the whole casting process. I read the script and it said POV, whenever, for most of Elwood's lines and everything, and I just kind of ignored it. I was more focused on the story and Elwood and, connecting with the material. And then show up on set that first day and kind of handed this rig with the camera attached to it, and we're like, all right, we're gonna take a shot of like your hands. And I was like, oh, we're jumping right into this. And I think that there was no time to be, worried or scared. It was kind of just, all right, like if they want to jump into it, let's jump into it. So I think that was very helpful for starting, and it took some time because, again, doing this, you start acting, one of the first things you learn is like, yeah, if you don't look into the camera, it's not something that you acknowledge, it's supposed to be there. Whereas in this experience, like you always have to be when you are talking to Turner or to Elwood. And so it's a bit of unlearning and then finding a way to connect and move in a way where you're not looking, into this lens, but you're looking into Turner's eyes or into Elwood's eyes. And it did take some time, and Brandon and I would work together before shooting scenes so that we're able to get a rhythm and a kind of understanding of how scenes would go, or maybe his face is reacting this way to something that Elwood says, and then when you get in front of that camera, it's just letting it melt into his face and letting kind of the imagination take hold and go from there.
I mean, yeah, my experience was pretty parallel with Ethan's, seeing that we were the two different perspectives looking into one another's eyes. But I mean, yeah, on that point, I mean, as you saw the film, Ethan's eyes have like so much power, so to not be able to have that in the scene, it definitely took some getting used to be able to find his face on that lens. Yeah, but like you said, we got to play and different things that he would do that I wouldn't be able to see because he's off camera, like got to inform everything, and then we just got to go and play. And we were always very present with each other, so he was always very close, and I could always feel him, so it was good.
Anjani, I'd love to hear you speak about that as well, but before that, I actually read an interview you did a year ago where you said that you actually tried to track down Ramel after you saw Hale County. Is that correct? Could you tell us a bit about your response to Hale County? I mean, did you know he was making a fiction film, or did you just want to speak to him.
Well, I saw Hill County. Let's give a shout out to Hill County. And as a Southerner, I'm from Southwest Mississippi, and I often feel when I see documentaries or even photography that is about the South, about Southerners, particularly Black Southerners, I feel that it can be exploitative, insulting, but I saw Hill County and I felt I was watching something that was familial, and I felt witnessed. I didn't feel like something in a fishbowl. And so I was so excited after seeing that movie. Saw it in Brooklyn at BAM. Sorry, y'all. Sorry.
It's okay. BAM is a partner venue of the New York Film Festival.
But I did see it there. And a couple days later, I knew that he was a professor at Brown. I went to Brown, so I knew the number, which was 401-861. So I knew how to reach him, and I called and got the direct, whoever answers the phone, and I said, may I speak to Ramel Ross, please? Of course, they were like, no. You can give him a message. Anyway, so I was so excited. I wanted to find him. I don't know what I was going to say to you, but I just wanted to say thank you, probably. And then, I don't know, 2 years later, a year later, I heard that they were doing something and there might be a part in there for me. And I said I didn't care what it was. I just wanted it to be a part of it.
I'd love to hear from the other actors as well, if you want to talk about just your experience, working with this particular formal device, this way of shooting the film. I guess with David, it was a little bit different in your case.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, so I got sent the script, and I was meeting, the first time I read a script, I read it like it's a novel. I'm not really thinking about who I'm gonna play. I just am like, do I like this thing? And I read it and loved it. I was already, and then I talked to Ramel, and he was explaining to me what was gonna happen. He was like, look, I don't want you to feel undervalued, but like, the camera's gonna be on your back, like, you're wearing the camera, but it's behind your head. And I was like, lit. This sounds wild, and I've never done anything like this before, and I'm sure I won't get to again, so like, yeah, let's go. That was a huge selling point for me, but it was mostly because I did not understand what he was saying at all. And then he sent me some dailies of these two, just scenes that weren't, sort of rough cut together. And it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen before. And I was so enamored with them, and I was so enamored with the way it was shot. And then I was like, oh man, I don't want to fuck this up. So like when I showed up on set, they put the rig on me pretty early in the day, and were like, you can take it off. And I was like, no, I don't think I can. Can you bring a monitor over here? I gotta how does it work? I don't want to, so that was my whole thing was just like, it felt like too much responsibility. I didn't want to sort of mess up the visual language of the thing, and so I spent all day in that thing just trying to sort of figure out how does it look the most natural now that it's behind somebody's head, and like what are the ways you can sit that work, what don't, where's my hand in the frame, blah blah blah. So it was super technical, but also really fun, and I got to work with great actors, do some great scenes. It was a really incredible experience for me. But it was scary because I was coming into a thing that was a train that was already moving, and it was so clear that it was going to be gorgeous already.
Fred.
To David's point, I thought it was one of the millions of amazing things about this was I was seeing how Ethan and Brandon also sometimes doubled as cinematographers, and then Jomo, who is a cinematographer of the film, also contributed in some ways as an actor, because practically speaking, we would do the scenes sometimes, and we'd start with Ethan, and then Jomo or Ethan would be wearing the actual rig, and so he's doing the physical work of an operator in that, and so the line between cinematographer, actor, all these kinds of rigid boundaries become opened up, and you start really feeling the movie. It was the experimental courage and emotional depth that, you know, Ramel always creates. So it was just like seeing them become cinematographers as well, and seeing Jomo be an actor was really fun as an actor, because that's something that just never happens before.
And Harish, curious to hear your perspective too.
I was a massive fan of the book. I got it the first week it came out, and my bookstore always has like the little signed copies. I don't know, they cheat or whatever. So, and then they called me about it, and they were like, "Do you know the story?" And I was like, "Oh!" And I took a picture of my book, and I was like, "Yeah, I know the friggin'." and then I read the thing about the POV and the thing, and I was like, "Oh my God!" Because when you read the book, you read those last pages, and you're like, "Oh no!" And then you read them again, and you read them again, and then he had done it. I mean, he had done that ending with this unbelievable, humongous artistic swing. And then we showed up on set, and they're like, "But you're not really going to do it." And it was like, "Oh no, I have no idea where the camera is because the guys are hiding from me." And then so I have no idea really what I'm going to do. And Ramel would be like, "There's going to be a crocodile." Like an alligator. And the kids will all be on desks, but you won't. And you'll say some lines you don't know for a long time. And there's going to be a guy with like a piece of twine that holds the alligator or crocodile. Good luck. Where's the camera? You'll never know. So it was just like, I mean, it was like such a, oh God, it was such a joyous, satisfying experience.
Maybe I'll just ask one more, and then we'll take questions from the audience. And just picking up on what Anjani was saying about Hale County, and how it's somehow different. It's set apart from other representations of Black life in the South. And I'm wondering if, with this material, with this film, did you feel like you were working against certain tropes, certain forms of representation? Were there certain things you didn't want to do, adapting a book about abuse and, brutality and trauma?
Yeah, I think like Hale County, which, evades hard, pillars of narrative, this book is wildly narrative. And so with its, almost focus on trauma being the not even invisible, but maybe just the overarching violence that kind of organizes it, unfortunately. I think it was clear that Jeremy and Dee Dee asked me to bring the non-trauma reveling, which kind of cinema has always done, maybe for a fact of not knowing how to do it otherwise, or simultaneously knowing that it's gonna get people interested and have emotional responses. And then I think the challenge then for Jocelyn and Barnes, co-writer and producer, was to give it form. Like, it's actually quite easy. If you say you're not gonna do something, there's a million ways to do it, And so it was just trying to come up with the right ones. And one thing we look at is thinking about when people go through traumatic things, or when people are human beings, like, they're not always looking in the eye of evil. Like, they're, when something traumatic's happening, and you look where you look, and those impressions become proxies, which then become, sense memories in future life that just ruin your day, or ruin your year, or ruin your relationships. And so we wanted to think about, like, where do people look, and then also try to figure out how to bring the truth of the Dozier School, which is all the source material, of course, of Coulson's novel, Dozier School for Boys in Florida, that closed 2011. They dug up the bodies in 2013, unfortunately. And fortunately, so that the story could be told and people could know. So how do you, and like bringing their images in when Elwood is being beat, and abstracting them, but having them be clear, is, to me, more visceral and devastating and memorable than seeing Elwood hit, because for all the reasons we know.
Is this something that you talked about with the actors?
No, we talked a lot about it with, of course, the producers, Jeremy, Didi, and David, and Joss. But I think one thing we wanted to do was, and a lot of conversations with Jomo were around how do we know how we want to shoot this, but we don't want to overburden the actors with the concepts that we think we're introducing. We wanted them to just be able to do their thing and to have experiences with each other so that whatever they do best is forefronted and not our ideas. Which is quite hard because the first directing moment I would say I had was like directing Ethan's hands, you know? And when Jomo and I, we make the frame, we're like, this is something, but we're not like, Ethan, you don't even know. Like, we were so hard to be like, Ethan, you don't even know. Like, if you knew that you're Elwood and Elwood having his perspective be the perspective that is simultaneously the perspective of the audience, they're having a double consciousness simultaneously, blah, 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 like, not useful.
There was only one time when we were shooting something where Ramel kind of like looked at us and he was like, "No, it's like this is kind of a big deal." and that was like the one moment where I was like, "Yeah, all right, I guess you're right." Like, and that's cool. But otherwise, yeah, I really do appreciate that. It definitely helped kind of be as present as we possibly could during the entire experience.
Yeah. I actually want to throw in one more question before we open it up. We've talked a lot about POV, but I think another really important element of the film is the use of archival material, and which is quite surprising and idiosyncratic, actually. But when did archival come into the process for you, and what kind of footage were you looking for?
Yeah, I think the archival inclusion in the film was the hardest to justify to the larger sort of people who usher the film in, simply because it's an abstract idea that I know just fundamentally works if you find the right archival. And it was part of the writing process. If you go back to the script, like, it's just replete with archival in almost the positions that they're in, not always. Of course, we worked with Nick, editor Nick, not script writer Nick. Scripty Nick. You guys, it's for another time. So I think, but in terms of archival, Allison Brandon and Alex Westfall were the archival sort of leads, and I gave them impossible tasks because we know how fraught the archive is. If you don't, you can just read about it. It's like popular knowledge. Cedia Hartman has critical fabulation, which is an amazing concept to deal with these issues. And I mentioned that just to give you guys a bone if you care. And I think looking at archival images and finding the interstitial moments that are sort of outside of the fraught power dynamic between the camera and the person on the inside, going to the Black Family Archive, which Bell Hooks says is the only site of resistance against the sort of onslaught of images made by people who necessarily don't have the same interest in revelatory humanness, is what we wanted. We wanted to bring truth, hard, factual, evidence, document, pedagogical truth into the film, but have those moments be moments where we're sort of rescuing people from archival conditions in which the power dynamics fraught.
Okay, we can take some questions. I think we have mic runners. Yes. Okay. Maybe we'll start over there. Yep.